to have an atheist who is convinced that Jesus rose from the dead.
Just an
writing.
atheist. Not just,
Whoa, that's what you said.
I said that would be one good thing. You don't have to have an atheist. You could have someone from another religion.
Don't you hear what you're saying?
You could have pick one.
That's what you said. I didn't make that up. You said it, not me.
People rose
You
from the
sat
dead
there
all
and
the
said,
time.
what I would really like to have is, I'd love to have an atheist.
I would love that.
Writing about Jesus really rose from the dead.
That would be fantastic to me. Yes.
Sir, that's an impossibility.
Relativists would argue that they have their beliefs and, they committed this act and they justified it themselves. But we hold our own beliefs and we must defend those. And we must defend ourselves against, intruding beliefs.
Really?
You can still maintain a relative philosophy.
Well, I never said you can't be a moral relativist and go out and hire gunmen to support your relative position. But what I'm arguing is, if you're going to be a consistent thinker, as a moral relativist, you have to acknowledge that what those terrorists did at the World Trade Center was not absolutely evil. It was just relatively evil from your perspective. And then the difficult question becomes, why do you want to lay your perspective on somebody else?
To put an end to acts like they committed, keep them from committing more of them.
Yeah, but if you accept relativism, you understand that reality is simply something you create in your own head.
And reality is, we have created on our head that we must defend ourselves. And every culture has to defend its own beliefs. Whether or not they believe, they can do whatever they want over there, but they come messing up our stuff, and we got to do something about it.
Yeah, but if you're true to your moral relativism, you have to acknowledge that it doesn't matter ultimately whether you bomb buildings or feed starving people. It's of no ultimate significance. It's just a personal bias, a personal prejudice.
There's a difference between a bias and a prejudice and killing 5,000 people. That's part of what we believe as a country, is that that kind of stuff is wrong. And we have to do something about it. We're not going to go stop any Islamic countries if they don't come messing with our stuff, because, as a relativist, I can say that, cool, they can hold their beliefs, whether they go to heaven, hell, whatnot, that's their thing. But, when they come over here.
Yeah, but sir, if you're consistent with your relativism, you have to acknowledge that what a person chooses is right for them.
If it was right for them.
But I'm standing here saying, you know that it wasn't right for them. It was wrong for them to slaughter innocent life.
Yeah, that's why we're retaliating. Well, that's what we believe, that it was wrong.
Obviously, they believed that what they were doing was right because they thought that it was worth dying for. Because those pilots, the hijackers, died for their cause. They damn sure thought that they were doing the right thing. But I don't think they did the right thing, and I don't think anybody in this country thinks they did the right thing. That's what moral relativism is. Yes, they thought it was right, but we don't.
Yeah, but moral relativism says there is no right and there is no wrong.
There's right
it's
for
all
you.
relative.
There is right for you.
Fine. I can say this is right for me, but if you disagree with me, I'm not right and you're not wrong. It's all relative. I mean, just think about your position.
Kill you or attack you, you're still going to have to retaliate to continue living,
Yeah, but you're in a real bind as a moral relativist. Because as a moral relativist, you have to think about your position on abortion, homosexuality, battered wives, abused children.
Oh my God.
Think about your position, and then realize that the opposite of whatever position you hold is equally valid.
It sounds like you're suggesting that we take personal responsibility instead of listening to what other people think is right? What a novel concept! Why, this is fabulous! If we all think for ourselves, maybe we'll finally reach our own truth.
Let me say it one more time to see if I can communicate a little more clearly to you. If you're a moral relativist, think about your position. Obviously, I don't know your position on abortion, homosexuality, battered wives, abused children. Now, if you're a moral relativist, you have to acknowledge that the opposite of whatever it is you hold on those hot emotional topics is equally valid. I refuse to do that. I insist that the terrorist bombings on the World Trade Center are not equally valid as my position, which is, do not murder innocent life. But if you're a moral relativist, and if you're going to be intellectually consistent and responsible for your own belief in moral relativism, you have to acknowledge that the terrorists are just as right as you are, because right and wrong are just relative. But you see, you moral relativists don't do that. Instead, you moral relativists go running around saying, oh no, that was absolutely wrong. No, it wasn't absolutely wrong. If you're a moral relativist, there is no such thing as absolute wrong. There's relative wrong, but it's all a crapshoot. It's all relative. I'm just holding you to be consistent and responsible for your belief system the same way you hold me to be consistent and responsible with my belief system. That's all I'm doing. And you know very well you can't do it. You know very well that you don't say, oh, Matthew Shepard was murdered because he was homosexual. Well, it's all relative. That's quite all right. If you want to go out and bash gays, that's cool. You don't do that. Instead, when you're confronted by the slaughter of a Matthew Shepard, you say, hey, guess what, guys? That's wrong. That's really, really wrong. You don't kick back saying, oh, well, what are we having for dinner tonight? You can't live out your moral relativism. Why? Because God has wired you in such a way that you have a conscience and you got a rational mind, which doesn't allow you to say, oh, yeah, go out and bash gays, that's cool. Because your conscience says, no, it's not cool. It's really wrong, isn't it?
Moral relativism doesn't mean being passive. It means accepting what other people believe, but choosing your own actions and choosing what you do about what other people believe.
Fine. As a moral relativist, you can choose your own actions. But what you cannot do is tell somebody else that they're wrong in what they freely choose. Because that's elitist, it's arrogant, it's pathetic. If you hold to your moral relativism, you simply say, I choose to do what I choose to do, you choose to do what you choose to do, the terrorist chooses to do what he chooses to do, those who murder Matthew Shepard choose to do what they choose to do. And it's all relative. One's not right, the other's not wrong, it's all relative. You can't live that out, can you guys? It's impossible.
Beliefs are separate from actions, though. And anybody is free to believe whatever they want. It's when those actions start getting carried out that you have to make a decision about what to do. And if your beliefs turn into actions, my beliefs will have to turn into actions about what I will do. I will not stand by and watch somebody be murdered because I think it's okay for them to believe that they should murder. If they believe that they should murder, fine. If they actually start to, not fine. That's the difference.
Fine, but what you've got to realize is you can't live out your moral relativism. You don't do that. Instead, you make some incredible statements about what's really right and what's really wrong.
The only accounts that you have here that corroborate the story, and they don't even corroborate that well, are Christian accounts. And they're not necessarily reliable because they're written by Christians. Now, if you had, say, a militant atheist writing and saying, gee, this guy Jesus raised from the dead, that's kind of odd.
Okay, good. Now, you're serious, right? You're not playing a game with me?
Oh, I'm not playing a game with you at all.
Okay. What I've just heard you say is, in order for me to accept the Gospels as historically reliable, I have to have an atheist who is convinced that Jesus rose from the dead.
Just an
atheist.
Not just,
whoa, that's what you said.
I said that would be one good thing. You don't have to have an atheist. You could have someone from another religion.
Don't you hear what you're saying?
You could have pick one.
That's what you said. I didn't make that up. You said it, not me.
People rose
You
from the
sat
dead
there
all
and
the
said,
time.
what I would really like to have is, I'd love to have an atheist.
I would love that.
Writing about Jesus really rose from the dead.
That would be fantastic to me. Yes.
Sir, that's an impossibility.
Not necessarily.
How on earth are you going to have an atheist writing, this guy Jesus really rose from the dead? You think he's still going to be an atheist?
Okay, take someone from another religion.
All right.
There are lots of accounts that were accepted of people raising from the dead. There was the Z name. I got it in my notes here somewhere.
Okay.
This guy dies, comes back from the dead, and it was a pretty well accepted account. A lot of people actually reported it as actually having happened. And in fact, people that didn't necessarily agree with the tenets of the religion under which it happened. The Thracian god Zalmoxis was buried, resurrected, and deified in his own lifetime, as described in the mid-5th century BC by Herodotus. He's also mentioned in Plato's Charmides, and that's in the early 4th century BC. And then you have the hostile account, which comes up and it says, well, Zalmoxis buried himself alive, telling his foxers he would be resurrected in 3 years, but merely resided in a hidden dwelling all that time. I mean, you don't have, there's no hostile account, ever.
Of Jesus.
Right. There's no hostile account that would lead you to believe that he rose from the dead, or that there's not even a real hostile account that would lead you to believe that the tomb was empty. And even if the tomb is empty, you don't necessarily have to believe that Jesus raised from the dead.
He said he came back and
Josephus writes in Antiquities 18.3.3 that Jesus rose from the dead. Josephus was not a follower of Christ. Josephus writes about it.
When was
Antiquities
Josephus writing?
18.3.3.
When was Josephus writing?
Early 100s, wasn't he?
I believe so.
Yeah.
But isn't it possible that he's just recounting the cult of this cult that's risen? He's recounting their religious belief?
He's a man who was not a follower of Christ, saying that it's purported that Jesus rose from the dead.
Yeah, he's saying it's purported. He's never attests to its veracity. He just says that's what they believe.
That's right. He didn't see Jesus risen from the dead, but he's recording that that's what people are claiming, that they saw Jesus risen from the dead.
There's no outside corroborating evidence.
Yeah, but don't you see what you're saying? You're saying that in order for me to accept those Gospels as reliable, I have to have someone who saw Jesus risen from the dead and chose not to believe in him.
I'm right.
You don't think that's unrealistic?
Not necessarily.
Oh, well, you're going to see Jesus risen from the dead.
I mean, you could see
You're not going to believe. You're going to go out and write hostile references about him?
You could see Jesus walking around after that, and, not even necessarily, you could just see Jesus and not even hear about it and write it down. I mean, like all the anonymous witnesses and the seeing the multitude, nobody wrote that down except for people that were already Christians, that were Christians when Jesus was alive.
No. Remember, when Jesus was arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane, all of his disciples deserted him. They were not true believers. They were Christ deniers, Christ deserters, Christ betrayers. These guys were not true believers.
If there is no God, there is no love.
Right.
I don't see what's wrong with that. Yeah.
All right, fine. But just realize that that's reality.
Right.
Which means
I think we're
nobody really genuinely cares for you. Rather, they have biochemical reactions that predispose them to maybe be positive towards you. But this bit about your mom and dad loving you, they don't love you. They have a biological drive to help you preserve your life.
I think it's oversimplified, but yeah. In fact, I know for that in some Indian languages, for instance, there is no word that means love in the sense that I love one person. I love someone as my or more particularly, there is no concept of being in love with someone. It almost seems like that supports what you're saying. It is just a chemical construction. I mean, sort of an abstraction from the chemical processes.
Okay.
It doesn't seem to keep those people from living unhappy lives.
That's right. Because I can promise you, they don't live like that.
How do you explain?
See, Jean-Paul Sartre put it best when he said, I have tried to live out my atheism. It's desperately hard and difficult. It's almost impossible to live it out. Because if atheism is true, then life is an accident, morality is totally relative, which means it doesn't matter whether you slaughter him or feed him. And when it comes to love, that's just a biochemical drive. That's not something, there's no such thing as genuine caring for another person. I was at Duke, and his student was arguing, there is no God. I said, fine, what motivates Mother Teresa to work among the dying in Calcutta? He said, obviously, a drive to preserve the genetic pool. And he's right.
Or some other kind of delusion.
All right, it's just a biological drive. that Mother Teresa had to sacrifice her life for the dying in Calcutta.
Just because
My experience of life says garbage. My experience of life is there are some people who hate my guts. And there are other people who really do love me. I know that might seem very difficult for any of you to believe, but there are some people who really care about me. And they've sacrificed, not motivated by a sex drive, not motivated by a drive to preserve the genetic pool. And to tell you the truth, sir, that's the most important thing in my life. Love. In my family, in my marriage, with the 3 boys I have, with my friends. And yet if there is no God, love is just an illusion. Because if there is no God, all we have is complex biochemical reactions going off in the brain, and it's all just determinism wins the day.
Is ice cream just an illusion? It's just a set of chemicals mixed together, and I mean, just because
It's not an illusion.
just because love
It's
is
something physical and tangible. Ice cream.
I mean,
Show me a foot of love.
happy.
Measure me out a pound of love.
Happiness.
You can't. Love is a value. And if there is no God, love, it doesn't exist in reality. I mean, we can create things in our heads, but in reality, there's no such thing as me freely choosing to take out my wallet and give you money because I care about you. That doesn't exist.
Is happiness real?
Well, it depends how you define happiness.
I mean, we've found chemicals, dopamine, serotonin, that if you give them to people, they become happy. If you
Fine.
take them away, people cannot be happy.
That's
So
if
does
there
that
is
mean-
no God.
does-
That's what happiness is.
Well,
If there is no God, happiness is a serotonin level.
But we've just shown you can adjust serotonin levels and make people happy or make people not happy. So I mean, does that mean happiness is worthless?
No.
Well,
But then just live that out. I mean, if that's what you believe. If you believe that happiness is a result of a serotonin level, that's all there is to real joy, then live that out.
Well, I mean, if I want vitamin C, I can go to my local drugstore and get some vitamin pills. But no, I like the taste of an orange, so I eat an orange. An orange is real, that vitamin C is fake and manufactured by a man. I enjoy the taste of an orange. I don't eat an orange because it's got vitamin C in it. I eat an orange because it tastes good. I don't take
Right.
serotonin pills to make myself happy. I do things for other people and for myself to make me happy.
but the result is that serotonin is released, and that's what makes you happy. Like the reason why you like oranges is ostensibly because it has sugar in it, and when you eat sugar, that makes your body feel good. That makes your endorphins go up, your serotonin levels increase. That's why you like it, because it makes you feel good.
What if I
because
just
the
like
chemicals in your brain, the chemical composition of your body has changed.
But what if I like just the color of the orange? What if I like just the way?
Okay, guys, but you're talking about physical, and I agree with you. If there is no God, we have physical appetites.
I agree with that. I think
I'm standing here saying, guess what, guys? There's a non-physical, non-material part to reality. Part of that non-physical part to reality is a value called love. To be honest with you guys, love is what makes my life go round and round. I've never seen a foot of love. I've never measured out a pound of love. It's an intangible, invisible, non-material, non-chemical value.
Have you ever measured out a pound of happiness? Have you ever measured out a foot of happiness?
No.
But we can cause happiness with just these chemicals. I mean, that's
Well,
my
it
only
depends
point.
what you
This
define as
chemical-
happiness. How do you define happiness?
So you're saying it's fake or is it real?
This feeling is caused by chemicals.
Well, fine.
That's
if you
all I'm
define
saying.
happiness as a biochemical reaction in your body, that can exist without there being a God.
Yes.
But there cannot be the real value of love,
No.
which flows from a free will, if there is no God. Because if there is no God, all of reality is matter and energy. So you got oranges, you got serotonin levels, you got jolts from caffeine,
You beg the
you got a
question.
biochemical reaction.
You beg the question by saying the real value of love does not exist if it's just a chemical. You're presupposing that there is some real value of love beyond chemical reaction.
I'm insisting that there is my experience tells me people have genuinely loved me, and I have chosen to love other people. And that is a crucial ingredient to life.
I don't think you can have your cake and eat it too. Here.
Sir, it's very simple when it comes to omniscience. I can know what someone's going to freely choose to do and not be manipulating them to do it. You've got to allow for God to be outside of the dimension of time Therefore, he sees all of time at a glance, which means due to his perspective, he can see what you and I will freely choose to do.
But God set
You can
everything
certainly
in motion,
grasp that,
right?
I'm sure.
I,
You can grasp that one.
I understand your analogy, but again, you're using a false analogy.
I'm not analogizing. That's not an analogy. God is outside of time. The Bible insists God is eternal, which means God is not limited by the dimension of time, the way you and I are. Which means, due to the fact that God is outside of the dimension of time, he can see all of history at a glance, in the same way that God's omnipresent. I am not omnipresent. I'm limited to one space at one time. But God can be in India, South America, and Athens, Georgia at the same time. Why? Because he's not locked into the dimension of space.
Okay,
all right?
But God set everything in motion, correct? And before he set everything in motion, he knew exactly what was going to happen from setting things in motion the way he did, correct?
He saw what was going to happen.
He saw exactly what was going to happen.
Yes.
So he could have said, I am going to start things slightly differently so that this different course of events happens.
You bet.
So God, at the beginning, had the option to know exactly what was going to happen from any possible world that he created.
Yes.
So, I mean, doesn't that, in the end, make it so that God is, in fact, responsible for everything that happens, period?
No. He's not responsible for the way I abuse my free will. Obviously, he's responsible for giving me free will. He's the one who gave me free will. But when he gives me free will, he's not responsible for the way I choose to exercise my free will. If I give you $1 to go out and buy a drink, it's not God giving you $1. I gave you the dollar. Similarly, if I steal your money, that's not God stealing your money. I chose to steal your money. Now, obviously, the difficult question is, why did God choose to give us free will? Ultimately, I don't know why God chose to give us free will. But please consider this option. Is it not possible for God, in his infinite wisdom, to allow short-term evil and suffering in order to bring about greater good? Let me say it one more time. Is it not possible for God, in his infinite wisdom, to allow short-term evil in order to bring about a long-term greater good?
I'm still not at all satisfied. You seem to be assuming free will. My problem is that I cannot possibly see having free will at the same time as God setting everything in motion and knowing all the consequences of everything that he did at the beginning. It's like if I make a machine that runs its course, and there are some variables inside the machine, I mean, whatever, but I could make the machine any way that I want. And if I am omniscient, I could make the machine such that any outcome that I want happens.
False, right there. Right there. You gotta run that reel back right there. There's absolutely no way that God can make a square circle. There's absolutely no way that God can make 2 + 2 = 5, and there's absolutely no way that God can give a human being free will and guarantee that that free will is not going to create evil. If you give free will to a human being, then there is the distinct possibility that that free will is going to perpetrate evil.
I'm saying that you can't possibly have free will under the circumstances of God's omniscience, omnipotence, and creating everything.
Yes, you can.
All right.
God limits his power by creating us free. Come on, you can grasp that. God freely chooses to limit his power by creating you free, which means God's saying, hands off. I'm not going to manipulate you. I'm giving you this tremendous gift of free will. Now you've got to go out and use it. You don't think that's possible?
No.
Oh, come on. You're not being honest with me. Of course
I'm
that's
being completely honest with you.
No, you're not. You're telling me as a cogent, and you're a very articulate thinking student, you're telling me that you cannot grasp how an all-powerful God could choose to partially limit his power by creating us free?
You've got to add in omniscience.
And we've talked about that.
And
God's omniscience is simply due to his perspective outside of time. He sees all of history at a glance, the same way if you've seen a movie. You know what the characters are going to do. You've seen the movie. It doesn't mean you're forcing the characters to do what they do, but because of your perspective outside of the situation that the movie is filming, you know what's going to happen. And you can grasp that, can't you?
I am getting really frustrated with your rhetorical trick of making me seem like an idiot for not agreeing with you.
No. I articulated very clearly to you, and you came back at me and said it's impossible. Now, obviously, this is not my first day speaking on university campuses, okay? Obviously, I've debated professors and the whole bit, and I can promise you, sir, what I'm telling you is straight on, logical, rational. This is not some highfalutin idiot talk I'm giving you. It's very reasonable, and I'm not playing any game with you. I'm not playing any verbal semantic trick on you. I'm shooting straight head-to-head with you. I've respected you and commended you for the excellent, difficult issue you've raised. I've admitted to you right off the bat, this is not easy, this is difficult, this is deep water we're headed into, so I don't have simple answers. But when I make some simple statements, I hope that you would be able to see what I'm trying to say.
I am going to have to agree to disagree with you.
Fair enough.
Okay, think of it like a chess game, right? Okay, you have each of them have like the. I just don't see how reducing things like. I mean, I thought the atheists were the one that were the reductionists, and they're kind of lambasted for that. But I don't see how what you're composed of, or what he was talking about, like where you came from, how that confers like any sort of value about where you are. Like, think of the chess game. You know, they're each made of the same things, but the fact that they have certain properties, like the queen has certain properties and it looks a certain way, that it has value within the game. You know, you take the queen out of the game and ask just by itself, does this piece have value? I mean, it just doesn't make sense within the game, which is, I mean, again, not relative. You can have like social facts and stuff like that. Just the fact that me and him are living in society, we have to come to rules, but they can be objective, because if I say I can kill him, then at the same time I'm saying I can kill myself. It's just almost a self-contradiction. So,
I hear what you're saying, and I'm convinced you're running away from reality. You're trying to create moral absolutes in a vacuum. And your vacuum is there is no God. And because there is no God, there is no mind prior to the human mind. There is no consciousness prior to human consciousness, which means it's obvious who makes values and who makes morals and who makes justice. It's the human mind that does, which means it's all relative depending upon which human mind you're talking to.
how's that different than God's mind? How's God like special enough that he can create but we cannot? You know,
God is beyond matter and energy. God is a spiritual being who is an eternal creator, who has a character, who's a personal being, who loves and who is just. And from his character flow the definitions of love and justice and mercy.
how exactly do they flow? Is it because they look like some sort of attribute of God, or is it some sort of weird, I guess, platonic?
Well, obviously they require a mind. Inanimate matter has no ability to appreciate love, justice, kindness, humility. Obviously you have to have a mind. And obviously the Bible insists God is not an it. God is a personal being with a mind. And because God has a mind, God defines, God creates, God loves.
By what standard does he create? You know, you're saying it's
He doesn't measure himself against a standard. That's what you keep going back to. There is no standard that God measures himself against. God is an eternal being whose character is good. And therefore, justice and goodness and love flow from his character.
What makes him good exactly? Is it because he coheres with some sort of outside standard? It's because he decides himself as good. I mean,
and therefore he defines them. And the basis, go ahead.
If you're saying that God just exists, that's all there is to it. But then when we say, well, love just exists, you say, no, love has to be created by God. Why can't love just exist as God just exists?
Okay, great question. Why can't this value of love just exist? Because a value of love demands a personal being.
Why?
Because inanimate matter, material, has no ability to love. You have to have a mind. You have to have personhood in order for love to exist.
Therefore, we create love.
we are persons.
Okay. Now, obviously, human beings are not eternal. Obviously, human beings have a beginning. Right? I hope we all agree on that. Okay. Which means, if we just come about as a result of complex chemical reactions, then what we are is simply matter and energy. There's no spirit, there's no soul, there's no free will. There are simply these highly, highly complex biochemical reactions in our brains. Materialism wins the day. Which means I don't freely choose to love you. Maybe I have a drive to preserve the genetic pool, so I don't want anybody to murder you. Maybe, as this gentleman says, I don't want to be murdered, so I don't want you to be murdered. So we can obviously have that kind of arrangement. But we cannot have a value of justice. We cannot have a genuine ability to freely choose to love an enemy, a friend, because we are determined by our chemical reactions. That's what reality is if there is no God.
I'm sort of a utilitarian where I think a lot of the things that society thinks are good are things that help society, and then also the things they say are bad are just things that they believe that hurt society, and also that like things that are bad, like people want to fit in. And, if society tells them that that's bad, then they're not going to do it.
Okay, I agree with you. If there is no God, it is still entirely possible that society creates morality. And utilitarianism is one approach to morality. All I'm asking you to acknowledge is that if what you say is true, if society is the basis of morality, then acknowledge that morality is relative, and if you happen to live in a cannibalistic society, it's just fine to eat people. If you happen to live in white South African society, it's just fine to have black people oppressed. If you happen to live in Nazi German society, it's just fine to gas Jews. There's no moral absolute separate from society that judges society. Now, see, one of the main reasons I can't buy into that, I mean, it's obviously an option, but one of the main reasons I can't agree with that is because I have a ton of respect for people who critique their society. For people who say, you know something, society? You're doing wrong when you have slaves. You know, society, you're doing wrong when you gas Jews. In other words, we as human beings have a conscience that enables us to understand that there's a value outside of society.
Couldn't you call that like checks and balances in society?
Well, sure, but what does that mean, checks and balances?
Like two contradicting morals that society brings upon.
Right.
So by analyzing these contradictions that society gives us, we can say one way or the other, or take the majority of them and say that this one's wrong.
Okay.
Just saying that
Sure, and that's an option. But my point would be, please be honest enough to acknowledge that one society is not right and another society is not wrong. It's all relative.
I don't deny at all that Jesus was a great guy. I would have liked him. He was.
No, you wouldn't have. Just read what he said. He said, if you believe in me, you go to heaven. If you reject me, you go to hell. You like that kind of guy? I don't. This guy steps out and says, hey, Cliff, if you believe in me, you're going to heaven. If you reject me, you're going to hell. I'm not going to say, oh, wow, thank you for that, interesting tidbit of information.
But he did it in a very nice way, I have to admit.
He did it in a nice way. Well, he described hell in some pretty graphic, horrible terms.
Okay, I don't want to get into that. I'm just saying that Jesus could be a moral guy in a way that we value because it helps our self-preservation. And maybe Jesus was an incredibly smart person, and he knew what was good for him and what was good for society as a whole.
Good. Okay.
Then we need, and there's no problem in saying what Jesus did, I will follow.
Good.
But there is a problem in saying what Jesus believes as being the Son of God, I shouldn't have to follow.
Okay, why is that a problem for you?
Because Jesus could be describing Jesus could be describing our society and what's right for us in absence of a God.
Yeah, right. And Jesus could have been starting the Republican Party, according to some Americans. But you don't have to study the Gospels too long before you realize Jesus did not start the Republican Party. That's an addition. So, when you read the Gospels, you cannot mistake the fact that Christ claimed to be God in human form. And to sort of say, well, he was a great teacher, but he was mistaken about his identity? I mean, come on.
There's people out there like that. Maybe he was a fanatic. Maybe there's a lot of people out there with great morals, and they don't believe in God at all. And that
I know
I trust them with my life.
Fine. Good. But if you're going to respect Jesus as being someone who was in touch with reality, but you're going to conclude that no, he was out to lunch when it came to his view of himself as being God, I mean, you've got a problem there.
I can do it with no scruples.
I mean, Jesus is either an idiot, he's either a lunatic, or else he's who he claimed to be.
Hey, there's some really smart communists out there. I don't believe in communism, but they teach us some things that maybe we should adhere to. Yeah.
So just because a person's a communist doesn't make him a lunatic. There's some very clear-thinking communists.
Right, there are, and there's some very not clear-thinking communists.
Yeah, fine.
Fidel Castro.
But if a human being starts walking around saying, I'm the creator of the world, then either they are severely out of touch with reality, or else they're who they claim to be. And obviously, Jesus is claiming to be God in human form. I mean, that dude is either one egomaniac who's totally out of touch with reality, or else he is who he claimed to be. But this middle ground, oh, you know, the good teacher dude, the good philosopher, he doesn't allow that option because of the extreme nature of his claims.
Other people have claimed that before. Why should we trust in Jesus?
Great question. Why should we trust in Jesus? Because when you watch how he lived his life, his ethics, when you listen to how he taught ethically, when you watch how he died forgiving his enemies, and then when you see that the evidence is he rose from the dead, the overwhelming evidence is the dude is reliable. He is totally trustworthy. I mean, if you can't trust Jesus, who on earth can you trust? Yourself. All right, well, I don't know you, but speaking for myself, I too often do that which is wrong. I too often am blinded by my own ignorance and my own prejudices. To put my faith ultimately in myself would be an incredibly blind faith in light of the evidence that I'm as fickle, prejudiced, irrational, and blind as I am at times.
There's no moral authority outside yourself. I choose Jesus' morals and not his ultimate beliefs.
Okay. You see, well, I'm standing here saying, if he murders you, I'm going to look him in the face and say, what you did was absolutely wrong, because my conscience convicts me that there's a standard outside of him and me. And that's why I was pressing you guys on, what do you mean when you say should? Every time you and I use the words should or ought, we're appealing to a standard outside of us and saying, come on, bud, buck up and smell the coffee. You should not have murdered him.
You think he shouldn't have murdered you because it's a threat to you and the rest of humanity.
Oh, baloney. Baloney. No offense to this guy, but I'm not particularly physically threatened by him. He doesn't look too big and tough to me, okay? So if he blows you away, all right, and I got 5 guys behind me with machine guns, I'm still going to look him in the face and say what he did was absolutely wrong, because you're a human being with innate value and dignity. And when he murders you, he is doing something that is absolutely unjust. He is attacking the dignity that God gave you. He's destroying you.
I have value to you, not because of God, but because I'm part of this society that we believe in morality, that murder is wrong because it hurts all of us.
Where's that morality come from?
Why does morality
It comes-
an authoritarian
We talked about this earlier.
Morality doesn't have to have God existing. Absolute morals demand some type of mind, God, to create and define them. So, my point to these gentlemen is if he murders him, and if I'm a moral relativist, I'm just going to look him in the face and say, well, from my perspective, when you murdered him, that was wrong. But I understand from your perspective it's right, so it's all relative, so it doesn't really matter. But my experience of life is, when I watch 2 jet airliners go into the World Trade Center, I don't kick back and say, hey, you know what you terrorists did was wrong. You know why? Because I'm an American. And we have a social contract in this country. And my social contract says, don't blow up World Trade Center. Baloney.
That's what I said.
Okay, what if you
Fine. But that's all relative.
Why is that?
It's all relative. And the terrorist says to you, so what? You've got your own definition of right and wrong. I've got my definition of right and wrong. We happen to disagree, but it's all relative.
Are our morals and God's morals, do they coincide? Are those standards, I mean, we go off of his standards, so is his morality our morality?
Okay, good question. If there is no God, morality is relative. Meaning by that, if there is no God, there's no mind prior to the human mind to define right and wrong. So the human mind defines what's right and what's wrong, and you got a lot of different human minds defining right and wrong as they want to. One is not correct, the other's not incorrect. They're all correct for themselves, it's all relative. Second point, my experience in life tells me that even though I might think at one point that something is correct, it doesn't make it right. I have a conscience that informs me that there is a value outside of me, outside of you. And when I violate that value, I experience guilt. The only way that value can exist outside of you and me, outside of society, by which we critique societies, is if there is some type of God to create and define that value. The only way there can be a moral absolute is if there is some mind prior to the human mind that creates and defines that value.
I understand that. I think the question is more geared along the lines of, is our morality God's morality? Or does it just come from God? Or is it a part of God? Or are our moralities coincide? Meaning, are all of, in a perfect, obviously there's no one who's perfectly moral, but if someone was perfectly moral, say, any example, is his morality exactly coincide with God's morality? Or is there some human version of God's morality that was imposed upon us by God, and the two aren't equal?
Okay, third point. The God who created moral absolutes created you and me in his image, which has nothing to do with physical resemblance, but it has to do with the fact that you and I have a conscience. You and I have a rational mind. Those are two gifts from God. A third gift is you and I have the innate ability to love. When you and I exercise our conscience, our rational mind, our ability to love in a responsible way, we are thinking God's thoughts after him. We are doing that which is absolutely good. Now, many of my atheist friends, in fact, all of my atheist friends, at times do real, absolute good. All of my theist friends, myself included, at times do that which is evil. As I look at all human beings, I don't see us as totally good or totally evil. My experience shows me we're all Jekyll and Hydes. At times we all do that which is absolutely good, and at other times we all do that which is absolutely evil. That is why we need God's forgiveness. That is what Jesus Christ offers through his death on a cross. Not only that, true religion, according to Jesus, is not just simply me trying to follow the rules, me getting into the ritual. Rather, true religion, according to Jesus Christ, is a spiritual relationship with Jesus Christ in which he changes my heart and sensitizes my conscience so that I begin to want to do God's will. And that, sir, is the hope for the world, from my perspective.
Well, I think if we accept the Christian viewpoint and we are trying to strive, we have accepted that our morality does come from God, and that God, this morality must be good because it came from God, and we take this morality and say we apply it to the Bible, there are things that morality, which has supposedly come from God, it is obviously in contradiction with what God has done in the Bible. I mean, pointing back to the constant cliches of the killing of the firstborn and the plagues, the floods, things of that nature. So, if our morality, which has come from God, is telling us that what God has done is wrong, even if it may be perfectly just and we can't understand it, how can we conclude this God, not to say that we conclude that he's evil, but how can we conclude that he's perfectly good if our morality is telling us that what he did isn't agreeing with our morality that has supposedly come from God? That's
good question. You bet. All right. The Bible reveals that God is good, totally good. Part of his goodness is revealed in his hatred of evil. In other words, if you look at what happened on September 11th, if you watch those jets go flying into the World Trade Center and people getting killed, murdered right and left, and you simply say, I wonder who's going to win the football game, there's something really wrong with you. Confronted by evil, if you're a moral person, you're going to reel back with moral indignation. That is just the tip of the iceberg. If you think you're angry about evil, which is appropriate, God has a white-hot rage against evil that is totally appropriate, because he's good. And the reason that God judges people, and the Bible records God judging nations at times, is because God chooses to make sure that evil does not ultimately win. That's why there's going to be a hell. There's not going to be a hell because God loves. There's going to be a hell because God is good. Because God is good, he guarantees that evil will not ultimately win.
How is there a hell?
sometimes the way like a lot of Native American and tribal beliefs is that, God is everywhere, that he survives, that everything's God, not so much that it's a spirit, like everything has a separate spirit, but that this is just God. God is being. God is the earth turning. That is God. And so, no, I mean, I'm not saying that like verses are opposing or trying to compare it. I'm just saying, just in general, depending on what you see God as. And so in your existence argument, you could kind of say, well, if you believe in the matter and energy, maybe that could be God to you. Not saying that God is not a being or anything, because that kind of takes out the spiritualness of it, which is.
Ma'am, what do you think about Jesus Christ? Who do you think he is?
I have mixed beliefs about Jesus Christ. I've grown up Catholic, Roman Catholic, and I've read the Bible. I'm familiar with the stories. I haven't read it like word for word, a lot of it, but I believe in Jesus Christ. I believe if he wasn't the Son of God, he was definitely a prophet, and I believe in his teachings. He had very, very good teachings, and I take the best out of every religion, but I do believe in Jesus Christ.
Some people believe that when Jesus died on the cross, he died to pay the penalty for our sin.
Right.
What do you think of that?
I believe it. I believe the stories. I'm not saying it's a story. I hate to question faith on itself because, like I said, I don't have any proof of that. And being a college student and part of being in college and being in different classes and learning other religious faiths and what they've brought up and what they believe, it makes me more question my beliefs. So like right now at this point in my life, I am more questioning my faith. I'm not saying I definitely believe Jesus Christ was real. I believe in all his teachings. And it's in this dying on the sins for the cross, I believe in it. I hate to say I don't believe in it.
Why?
Just not only because I know I'd be getting a lot of rejection from a lot of people because of that, but because specifically in Catholicism, if I say that right here, I've probably got a mark in my book for saying that.
Okay, some people believe that Jesus rose from the dead. What do you think?
It's in the Bible. Depends on what you believe, how much truth and fact you put into the Bible. And I definitely believe most of the New Testament. A lot of the Old Testament I don't believe as much, but the New Testament I do. And it was documented in the Bible, so I'd like to believe in it.
Right.
I like to believe in it. I like to believe in it because I like to think that my sins have been forgiven.
Right.
Because God knows I've sinned a lot.
So have I.
Right, and
Right.
we all have. So even if I have to say, like, even if my senses and what I've learned, and it starts to make me question it, and makes me not want to believe, it's almost like I want to believe anyways because it's like security and it makes me feel good.
Huh. Okay, then, if you do believe that Jesus Christ died on the cross for our sins, then have you responded to Christ and asked him to forgive you?
Well, I pray every night, and when I do wrong, I know I've done wrong, and I ask for forgiveness. I ask more for help to make me not do that again.
Great.
And see, that's what's easy about being Catholic, too, because I could go do whatever, and I can go to confession the next week. So that's where it's different, but...
Okay, but wait a second. If I say that I believe in Jesus, and then I go out and contradict what he calls me to do,
Right.
but then in the back of my mind I'm just thinking, oh well, but I can ask him to forgive me.
Right, see, and that's the thing.
What would you call that?
That's hypocrisy in a way, but
Isn't it?
so many people believe in that. That's how so many people work, though.
Yeah.
So many people work that way, and I pretty much just said I work that way, which I really don't. I don't go out thinking, well, I can go shoot somebody and I can ask for forgiveness. That's not what I believe.
Right.
But I like knowing that when I do screw up and I feel guilty about it, if nothing else, like one of my favorite lines from Proverbs, when we quote the Bible, is the Lord. I can't quote it word for word, but it's like, since the Lord, everything in your life is basically set up by the Lord, so why question it? And so I know when I mess up and stuff, it's all part of the plan, and I know that I can pray to God and he'll forgive me. Does that make much sense?
Yeah, but we got to be real careful there. When I sin, that's not because God wanted me to sin,
No.
right? When I sin, that's not because that's part of God's plan for me, right? When I sin, it's a result of me making an irresponsible decision.
Being human.
And therefore I turn away from that sin and ask Christ to forgive me. But what that means is, Jesus, I don't want to do that again.
Right.
Help me to change my behavior to live a different way. Right?
Right.
Now, when I put my faith in Christ, it means I trust that Jesus speaks the truth. And so I'm trusting that he died on the cross for my sin. I'm putting my faith in him and trusting him to get me to heaven. Now, if I really trust him, then it means I want to obey him, right?
Right.
In the same way that if I tell you I trust you, I don't walk away from you like this.
Right.
No, I turn my back because I trust you. Similarly, if I put my trust in Jesus Christ, it means I want to obey him as Lord, as the boss, the manager of my life.
Right.
Does that make sense? And I love the way you use that word hypocrite. If I say I love Jesus, but I hate him, I'm a liar. Because if I say I love Jesus, he's going to change me so that I love this man. Similarly, if I say I believe in Jesus and I'm going to go out and commit adultery, then I got some problems. Right?